So I did a little bit more research. I've been busy. I apologize today. But I did a little more research on some of the stuff we talked about yesterday, and I came across something pretty interesting. Now, you guys may have heard of OPIC, not OPEC, not OPEC, but OPIC. And OPIC it was started in the early 70s, and it's Overseas Private Investment Corporation, which is basically how the U.S. government can mobilize private equity into emerging markets. I've been talking a lot about how Ukraine and these other former Soviet states, after the fall of the Soviet Union, were nothing. Their economies were terrible. They had massive inflation. They had a bunch of problems. The Freedom Support Act that allowed the United States to provide funding or aid to these countries also pushed for the expansion of American businesses in these countries. These American businesses would have gotten funding, loans, contracts, and insurance, a lot of them through OPIC. Going into the early 2000s, it ramped up even more. Now, why is it, if you go look, you can find many funds, these investment funds that have been started that have political connections? That could be for a multitude of reasons, and I'm not going to sit here and hammer investment funds for having political connections. That just seems like a smart business move. But I will hammer investment funds that are started by family members of our elected officials, like Hunter Biden, Christopher Hines, Devon Archer, who worked as a senior campaign manager for John Kerry. That's what I will hammer them for. The Pelosi's probably do the same thing. Nonprofits, NGOs, and these private equity firms play a big role in our foreign investments for the United States of America. Ukraine is not the only country this happens in. We do it in Congo. We do it in, small, poor countries in Africa. But there's something that caught my eye when I was reading about this and what the OPIC entails. Not only is it funding, but they also offer what's called political risk insurance. So many of you may know, I talk about this a lot, I work in the investment industry. All right? I'm very proficient in the stock market, investment vehicles, and insurance. My area of expertise as far as insurance is kind of limited to like long-term care, life insurance, disability insurance, stuff that's protecting assets, right? But what I can tell you is the political risk insurance makes a lot of sense with what we see in a lot of these countries that the U.S. has conflict in. So let me pull up here. I looked up the definition of political risk insurance. Richie says you look like a numbers guy. I am. I wasn't always, but I've become that. So political risk insurance is a type of insurance that can be taken out by businesses of any size against political risk. The risk that revolution or other political conditions will result in a loss. Political risk insurance is available for several different types of the insurance is available for several different types of political risk, including political violence, such as a revolution, insurrection, civil unrest, terrorism, or war, government expropriation or confiscation of assets, governmental frustration or repudiation of contracts, wrongful calling of letters of credit or similar on-demand guarantees, business interruption, and inconvertibility of foreign currency or the inability to repatriate funds. Does that not sound like everything going on in that area of the world right now? I think that, let me say this. I think we have politicians Republican, Democrat, Independent, whoever, I don't care. Let's not even throw Biden into this. He's just a good person to use examples for. But I think we have a lot of people that we've elected that have severe conflict of interest or business ventures indirectly, because obviously they wouldn't be doing it directly. Some of them might, but indirectly in all of these regions. Emerging markets is where OPIC focuses on. Places like Ukraine after the Soviet Union crashed, places like Congo, places like Iraq, places like Afghanistan, Mexico, so other countries in South America that are just poverty-stricken countries that they are trying to develop and offer, new business opportunities. Raccoon, yes, you're right. That is where I was getting at. Insurance, and particularly certain types of insurance, is heavily used as a form of money laundering. What I'm trying to find out, okay, is if the benefits that you get when making a claim on the political risk, if something does happen in that country and affects your business, if that benefit is taxable. I say that because I know life insurance benefits are not taxable. That's why the wealthy utilize life insurance as a means to pass money down to their heirs with, tax-free. This is known. So it'd be interesting if I could find it. I'd have to go read through some laws to see if political risk insurance benefits are taxable. If they aren't, that means a business could go into these areas, get loans from the OPIC of however much, try and develop a business, generate revenue for a few years, and then they go in there, and this is a conspiracy, okay? I'm just throwing a scenario out. But, the government goes in there. A lot of these people in our government are tied to the businesses generating the revenue that they've got given loans to. They stir up political unrest in these countries. What have we seen in Ukraine since 2014? We've seen insurrection. We've seen revolution. We've seen war. All of those. And then they put in a claim for that business after so many years. And they get all that money, that revenue they generated that is now seen as a future loss because they can't keep generating that revenue. They make it all back up in insurance. If it's not taxable, they just basically wash their hands with that taxable revenue that they've created the last few years that maybe they deferred taxes on or whatever it was. And they're raking in the insurance premiums. Again, I can't give you a specific example of this. Maybe I'll find one. I'll keep researching. I don't know. But I can tell you right now that 100% is a viable, that could happen. 100% could happen, especially overseas. If you go, the OPIC is now I think it's DFC. It's combined. But you can go on that website. They offer up to $1 billion in political risk insurance. If you want to go do business in Ukraine or you want to go do business in one of these, poor, conflict-stricken areas and stuff, you can try and go and apply for funding through this government program. Now, what I do want to say is that it's not taxpayer reliant. The money isn't coming from the government itself as far as funding this stuff. It's they get the money from other private entities. So they say, and from what I've read just a little bit, it doesn't impact the taxpayer at all, but it is used to reduce the deficit because apparently between 2006 and 2016, it reduced the annual deficit by a couple $1 billion based off of the revenues that the program brought in. with interest payments on the loans and all that. But political risk insurance seems extremely, it almost seems like it's a conflict of interest for our government, because our government is in that policing role around the world. You know, we do go in and try to interfere in these conflict-stricken areas. It does seem like there's a conflict of interest with us having something like the OPIC, where we're trying to get American businesses in there to invest, and then all of a sudden we have a lot of control on the political problems that happen. And Ukraine is just a great example, because if you look back with Yushchenko and the Yanukovych and the political proxy battle that has gone back and forth between the U.S. and Russia and Ukraine for the last several years. So don't say that businesses weren't looking to take advantage of that. And this program could absolutely 100% be used to launder money. 100%. I thought that was really interesting. I'm still reading a lot about this OPIC. From what I've seen, apparently due to the Freedom of Information Act, they should have an area where you can go and check who's received money from these programs. But it's interesting. It's very interesting. I read yesterday that Biden had played a role with some OPIC stuff and with Chinese businesses. That all is a part of this. So, I'll put the links to a lot of this information. There's a Google book. Apparently Google Books is very informative, but it's basically when you read it, it's like a Senate hearing that they've recorded. It's all the minutes and stuff. You can go back and read it, and there's a lot of information in this stuff. So that guy says the chess player. I don't know what they're talking about in the comments, but it's a scam. It's a huge scam, and I'm sure the OPIC has done a lot of good. I'm sure it's made a lot of money, but it's being abused 100%. Here's the thing. Here's what I believe. I don't think that any of our elected leaders or any of their family members, all the way, like if you're a first cousin of Joe Biden or Donald Trump, you should not be allowed to receive any government contracts. I don't care. And you shouldn't be allowed to go and start a business after that person has been elected and start receiving contracts, for sure, which is what the Bidens were doing. When they hand out contracts, if they were going to get a contract, they need to do it on an anonymous, have an anonymous system to it, where they don't know the name of the business. They only know the financials of the business and the track record of the business and prior history that business has been involved in. Like if they need a construction project done, then allow construction companies to come in there, submit their bids for the contract, but they don't put their name, they don't put their identification number, nothing until after that contract is awarded. And if they have an issue, once that contract's awarded, that something with the company, then they go and they find another one. But they should not know, the government should not know specifically who is getting the contracts until that contract is awarded. And there is a way to do that. So that's kind of what I found on this OPIC in some of my research today. But I would suggest, especially you conspiracy people, like I said, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I know that there's a lot of people that love looking into this crazy information. If you wanted to try and grow an opinion that you already have on some of this stuff going on, go read about the OPIC. And don't read just articles. Go read the actual legislation and government workings with the OPIC. Make sure it's directly from the people that are involved and that run it. I think you'll be very surprised. But the political risk insurance definitely caught my eye And when you look at how they pay it out and what they're insuring for, it's all the shit that's going on in Ukraine right now. So, next, Eric, have you listened at all to the confirmation hearings for the court?
I haven't really paid very much attention, but there is one U.S. senator, and I like her line of questioning. It is your U.S. Senator, Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee.
Yeah, she's good. Did you what she asked? I haven't.
She's super awesome. I like her a lot.
I wanted to get.
And I like Rand Paul and a few others.
Yeah, I wanted to get opinions on this lady that they're trying to nominate. I don't know anything about her other than apparently she is very lax on pedophiles, which is not good.
Oh yeah, that is true.
I don't know if that's. I don't know how true that is. Like I said, I know nothing. I haven't listened to it. Been paying attention to other things, but I didn't know if anyone had any input on any of that as far as that woman's concerned. You know, the other thing is I wanted to play a video. This is hilarious. I saw a video on Reddit last night on looting, or these Ukrainian citizens got caught looting. Now, think about this. They're probably struggling to find food. They're probably struggling to, find water in some places, especially Mariupol. These Ukrainian soldiers caught Ukrainian citizens looting. You know what they did? Gosh, this punishment should be used for everywhere, by the way. They freaking saran wrapped their asses to a fucking street pole. There's like 2 or 3 people. They saran wrapped their asses to a street pole. So they were trapped, but basically tied them to the pole and fucking pulled their pants down and left their pants down so their dick was hanging out in front of everyone. And you know it's cold in Ukraine too, so they had nothing happy to show off. And they just left them there. They just basically taped their upper and lower bodies to the pole so they couldn't move, and then pulled their pants down in front of everyone and left them there. I was like, gosh, can we please do that here? The looks on these guys' faces, they were so ashamed and embarrassed, you knew they were never going to do it again. And they really didn't physically hurt them. Just made them uncomfortable. Turtling on the show. Exactly, dude, Sean, yeah. Because it's probably in the 30s and 40s there still. I think it's still snowing. You're not going to be proud of anything. I don't care, how blessed you are when it's that cold. So I thought it was a good form of punishment, honestly. But I don't know. I didn't really have, a lot of time to do too much Arctic Dick. Stop. I didn't have too much time to do some research. I was reading about the OPIC stuff. I'm going to do more reading on this. I think that there's a lot of information out there that connects, like I said, all people of Congress. And Raccoon may know about the OPIC. If he does, please call in. But for you money laundering people, that's where it would come from. 100%. Let's see.
And here might be a show idea for your next show.
Mm-hmm.
You might do some research on an organization called ALEC, which is acronym for American Legislative Exchange Council, and how they're very influential in going to state legislators and influencing legislation there, and how they seem like very unstoppable, and also how very corrupt they are.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of programs. Look, the problem is there's so many pieces of legislation that, you get that one big piece of legislation. Like I keep pointing to the Freedom Support Act, right, in 1992, that has a lot of these provisions in it. But a lot of those provisions that are put into that to create that entire bill come from smaller provisions in other bills. Like there were other pieces of legislation passed around that time that revolved around, weapon proliferation, either nuclear or biological. Like there's a lot of pieces, and then they take pieces of these bills and either amend them or add to them or get rid of them in the major pieces of legislation. That's why when you go through it, it's all a bunch of legal banner bullshit saying amending part, section 25A, blah blah blah, and that's like half the reading. That's why it's so hard to read the actual piece of legislation for the most part. The easiest bills to read from what I've seen are the ones that are introducing new policy, because there's nothing to them, man. You don't have all that legal freaking bullshit about how they're scratching it out and all that. It's just, writing what they're doing, like the new rules or laws or whatever they're trying to implement in the bill. So there's so much paper trail because all of this stuff is public knowledge. There's so much of a paper trail, it gets confusing as to what's still in place, what's not in place, where money's going, where it's coming from. It gets really confusing. So what I tend to do, and I don't know if this is the best way of researching it, but I try to only get information when I'm talking about politics from actual political policies and the actual writings. Because whether or not they're upholding it, you can always go back and say, well, this is what you're supposed to abide by. This is what you pass. This is what you're trying to pass. Right? You're going right to the source, not getting it from some mainstream news site that is, spinning that piece of legislation or what these people are actually trying to do in a way that fits their narrative and their audience. So I tend to read the articles first and then look at, okay, well, where are they saying the money's coming from? Oh, OPIC? Okay, well, let me go look up OPIC and see if I can find that in legislation and see what that consists of. And then I go and I do the reading from there. So I kind of work it backwards. What's up, Raccoon?
Hey, Mike, I got something that they should have done when they saran wrapped them guys to the light poles. They should have broke out the orphan calves and let them have their way.
Stop. Stop. You don't want to. Gosh. I'm not gonna lie.
That's why we do things out here in the West, man. When we have cattle, and get a cattle rust, you just tie him to a fence pole and pull his pants down and turn the orphan calf loose on him for an hour.
Well, this was funny because they
usually don't come back.
Well, this was so funny because it was like public embarrassment, but they didn't physically really harm them, right? Like, yeah, you would have been uncomfortable because you've been cold for, I don't know how long they left them out there, even an hour. Hell, if you did it in New York City in the middle of the day, 10 minutes would be enough to make you not ever want to do it again, right? Just the thought of that.
Yeah.
And so I was like, damn, there we go. We're not shooting anyone. We're not arresting anyone. They're not booking them. They're just taking them, tying the damn pole for a couple hours and pulling their pants down in front of everyone.
Yeah.
I thought that was a pretty smart idea.
Different country.
Yeah. We should take advice from some of these countries and some of the, forms of punishment. Again, I'm not talking about physically hurting anyone. They're not hurt. They're fine. They're just embarrassed. Nothing wrong with that. Oh, so
yeah, but hell, anymore in the United States, you can't really embarrass anybody anymore. They get mad and they'll go get a lawyer and sue you.
Yeah, that guy. They were looting. They got caught looting. So imagine us
taking. I'm just saying, here in America, though, if you upset somebody or say something that they don't like or do something they don't like, they want to get you arrested or try to sue you.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way our society has gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy crap.
It was pretty. It was funny. I couldn't believe I was watching. I was like, oh my god, this is hilarious. But yeah, they were looting. So imagine, during the BLM riots or out there in San Francisco recently, all those looters just taking and then you taping their asses to the pole and pulling their pants down in front of everyone. They can't do anything about it.
That would be hilarious to see that on the news.
God, would it? So, what do you know? Do you know anything about the OPIC?
Well, I know a good bit about it. I studied it for a while there.
Mm-hmm.
And something that a lot of people don't point out on that when they talk about it is the majority of those corporations that stuff money into the OPIC are entities that lobby governments and got politicians on the take, and they can get things done without having anything really happen to them because they're guarded by the government officials.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the crazy part. I mean, once you start digging into who owns what, what's doing this, and who's doing that, you uncover so much weird crap. You end up going down a dozen rabbit holes, and every time you get down there, you get dizzy from lack of oxygen. You got to go find another rabbit hole.
Oh yeah.
But if people look at it, we had this bit of discussion one other time about who owned what, and you see these companies who are basically caught in stocks that, this certain company owns so much in this company and stuff like that. Well, when you really look at it and you start tracing it back further and further, then you find out the real magnitude of it, because our companies and our corporations here in the United States, except for a select few, and I'm talking under 10, have got their hands in every realm of politics, manufacturing, commerce, money trade, all that.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets really kind of bizarre the way they've got it structured up, to where maybe a company has X amount, but when the big company calls down and said, "No, guys, follow his lead and do as he wants you to do, even though he doesn't own all the shares he needs. We're backing him and the other people who are involved in the shares that you own or have on trade."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's where it gets really bizarre, because Heinz itself owns a ton of, and I say that loosely, they own a ton of corporations that deal under Heinz's rule. And it's the same with Pepsi, Coca-Cola, Sony Entertainment. All them big companies that are overseeing all these people have so much stock bought in all the other companies. They tell them, "Look, we'll back out, and you can go off to the side if you don't want to play the game."
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it get. I mean, I understand you're in the money market stuff, doing stocks and stuff like that. But when you really get down and you deep dive into these things, and you see the corporate um, playing field, it starts to click in your head. Why are they doing it this way? But now I see this is why, because this company who owns all these companies have shares bought into this company that may not be more than 10% or 20% each, but they can all get together and say, "Hey, our boss says you're going to do it this way."
Yeah.
Or they get a call from the big guy and say, "No, listen to those guys down there or we'll shut you down." Like George Carlin said, it's a big ass club, and and we ain't in it.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Here's what I'll say.
they
Look,
don't want people to.
I understand business
But
is business. I'm 100% capitalist. People know this, okay?
well, yeah,
And I am all for the stock market and the opportunities that it provides everybody, because anyone can participate in the stock market. Are there certain things that happen? Absolutely, just like Raccoon said. I will say, where I start to have a problem, because you can't fault a business or a business owner, let's say, who is trying to do things in the best interest of the business, whatever it is, okay? Now, obviously, there's a fine line between illegal and legal. There's a lot of gray areas, though. Where I start having an issue, though, is not even our government providing help for these businesses to go and expand overseas, because you need that now because other countries are doing it. China's expanding overseas. Everyone is, right? You need to be competitive. I do have a major problem, though, when it's not just the government providing money to private businesses, it's the government providing money to private businesses owned by the people in the fucking government. Okay?
Yeah.
Because you're not getting any, what opportunity are you providing other than yourself and a few people that are connected to you? That's where my problem is.
Sometimes those businesses that you're talking about only have a dozen people or less in them, and it's nothing but a front.
Yeah.
Look at the foundations. A lot of these foundations are running on what most business people would call a skeleton crew, just enough to keep everything straight, but not enough to do anything perpetual. I mean, you get into business and you go overseas to make money on slave labor that they have, because I say slave labor, they're paying them a fraction of what they do America, and it's all for one thing and one thing only.
Yeah.
Profit.
And by the way, I was reading in that book, and basically that book I'm talking about, look, it's not a book. It's basically the minutes to a Senate hearing they had that revolved around OPIC and authorizing it. One of the concerns brought up was, and this is back in 2006, the funding of, these low-cost factories over in China and these other countries in Asia and around the world, and the impact that it has on American jobs. OPIC and the people that run it, a lot of them economists, are supposed to take into consideration with their funding the negative impact that would be had on the American economy and American jobs when funding programs or businesses to go overseas and basically, what is the word I'm thinking of? And
Launder?
No, not launder. When you send your work overseas, you're fucking A. Why can I not think of this word? I know the word. It's
outsourcing.
Outsourcing. There you go. When they outsource this stuff. So there you go, Scooter. Appreciate it. So when they fund these businesses to go and take advantage of outsourcing, they're supposed to take that into consideration. But when they take it into consideration, it sounds like it's more of a risk to reward deal, where if the profits to be made from outsourcing far outweigh the risk of losing American jobs here domestically, they'll still fund that program. Which is, you would make the argument that Nike's gain of labor in these, in Vietnam and places like that, using either no cost or low cost labor as opposed to doing it here, probably far outweighs how many people they employ here, because they have to pay them, 5 times the wage. That's how it seems that to be how they look at this stuff. Again, I get a business owner that is trying to do what's best for the business.
Yeah.
But the government itself needs to act in what is the best interest of the American people, and that is it. Nothing else should matter.
Something else you have to look at too, Mike, is when you're looking at businesses going overseas to have it done cheaper and in more quantity without the workmanship in it. They're doing that because if you tear up the shoes tomorrow, you'll go out and buy another pair of them because everybody's wearing them. Or if it's a TV sets, they say, well, we can't make them here in the United States for this amount. It used to be Curtis Mathis was the best TV on the market at one time, and then they sold out and they no longer make them. But those TVs used to last forever. But we don't do that anymore because we're in a throwaway economy. We can throw away the item because it can't be repaired, or nobody knows how to repair it, or there's no repair parts for it, and you can't do it cheap enough to outweigh the fact, well, just throw it away and go buy a brand new one. They're on sale this week.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what kills us, because our economy has to thrive on junk products to keep the stuff coming in, so that everybody's warm and fuzzy about having all this new stuff that they could care less about. I mean, people don't respect their own buying power. They just go out and just keep spending it on credit or whatever they're doing. And they don't look at the fact that if they spend a few more dollars on it, it will probably last 10 times longer.
Mm-hmm.
It's like buying a Ford car and a Bugatti handmade sports car. If you could afford the sports car, why would you want to buy a Ford? But not everybody can afford the Bugatti unless you have tons and tons of money. So you have to settle for the Ford
Mm-hmm.
or the Toyota or whatever car. You know, I call them commodity cars because they're run off on a production line just like anything else we get. It's a production automobile or a production TV. They run on a line, and not one person on the entire assembly line knows anything other than their own job, because that's all they do day in and day out, and they don't have to worry about anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And those people will throw the parts in there the way they're supposed to, or somewhat the way they're supposed to, and maybe it gets quality control checked at the end, and maybe you're the one who picks up the one that never got the quality control check on it, but did get a seal on the back of it that said it was quality control checked. It's just like everything else. There's no responsibility in what's going on. There's no responsibility in taking the blame for the warranty or the guarantees or anything else like that. They say a guarantee is worth its weight in toilet paper.
Well,
That's about one sheet.
there doesn't have to be responsibility when there's no consequences.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. You know, they don't have to warrant the damn thing. You get it with a 90-day warranty, and chances are it goes out on the 91st day. You know?
Yeah.
Well, I gotta go buy another one. I can't do anything with this one.
Which, by the way,
And
guys,
that's what we face.
warranties are in, at least from numbers I've done, are probably the biggest waste of money ever. In my opinion, at least on certain products, warranties are. Sorry,
Yeah.
let me take that back. A lot of products, like you buy a washer, comes with a warranty automatically, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. When you go to wherever you're buying that washer at and they offer you another warranty, that is the waste of money I'm talking about. Because chances are the shit already has it, and then the company will replace it. You don't need to go and spend another $100, $200 at, fucking Sam's Club, or I don't know, whoever you're buying it from, for another warranty on that product. So it's just not worth it.
I bought a shitload of appliances from Sears 5 years before they decided they were going to close. And then things started breaking down and nobody wanted to do any work on them. So we ended up having to buy new ones from another company. And it's like, what the hell difference does it make anymore?
Absolutely.
They're all throwaway products.
So I want to read, I pulled up something on OPIC though. So I want to at least read this out so everyone gets an idea without me just trying to freaking fumble it and explain what it is. So the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, OPIC, was a U.S. development finance institution. This government agency assisted private businesses that wanted to invest abroad. OPIC encouraged development in emerging markets through private sector investment overseas by assisting corporations to analyze and manage risk while encouraging development in emerging markets. Now, I went over what emerging markets means in this example. That would be like your former Soviet states, like a Ukraine, especially in 1992, was definitely an emerging market. Afghanistan, Iraq, they do business in South and Central America, Mexico, all that stuff. So those are your emerging markets. This helped the agency advance the country's foreign policy and national security goals. OPIC was consolidated with the U.S. Agency for International Development's USAID Development Credit Authority to form the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation in 2019, which I believe is DFS. So understanding the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, it was established in 1971 as a U.S. government agency under then-President Richard Nixon. It was the country's one and only development finance institution, and was based in Washington, D.C. DFIs are government-owned organizations that invest in private sector projects and promote national interest. As the country's DFI, OPIC helped private sector investment abroad. OPIC backed projects were reinforced and aligned with U.S. foreign policy. They fostered economic and political stability along with free market ideals, especially in conflict-ridden areas. Now, I don't know about you. I want you to think about this. Again, I said I do a lot with insurance. When you are going to get underwriting for insurance, let's say you go and apply for life insurance, and you're on your deathbed, you're not getting insurance. They're not going to fucking give you life insurance if you're going to die tomorrow. And you can't expect them to pay out. Why? Because the risk, they would go broke. Right?
Yep.
You get life insurance when you're healthy. The healthier you are, usually the cheaper it is. And the less chance you have of dying, which means you're less risk to the company. And then as far as how whole life insurance works, where if you keep it for your entire life, no matter what they pay out, you're paying a higher premium, and you're usually paying it for so long that they've already made all of the benefit that policy is for in interest in other investments somewhere else. So if you're paying $100 a month for a $100,000 policy and you're 30 years old and you pay that until 80 or 85, okay, the insurance company has actuaries saying, all right, he's extremely healthy, has a very low chance of dying, at least of natural causes, and from now until then, we're going to take that $100 a month. We'll put a little bit away. We're going to hold $100,000 in a account for him, so we have the money to pay out, and make sure we always have that money to pay out. But we're taking that premium, we're investing it somewhere else, along with all the other premiums, usually in safe investments, probably in debt securities, treasury securities,
something
things like that.
Safer than insurance.
Well, yeah, but it's just safe because they look. That's why when interest rates are high, usually it benefits insurance companies because they're making more money on fixed interest investments.
Yep.
Less than 1% of term life insurance ever pay out. Now, it's important to have it, but it's usually really cheap. The reason it's really cheap is because less than 1% ever pay out. But still, when you go to get underwriting for that, if you have terminal cancer that's going to kill you in a month, you're not going to get it. But yet, our government will give people political risk insurance to go do business in politically risky environments.
Yeah.
It's
because
not,
they're going to get a kickback, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, I could see, let's say you're English and you want to do business in the U.S., but since you're maybe you're not familiar with the U.S. system, but U.S. obviously first world country, very prosperous, right? Good place to do businesses, but maybe they come out with policy that flips your business upside down. Maybe you do oil, right? And you have Biden who comes in we change presidents every 4 years or 8 years, and that could screw your business over. So you have that political risk insurance to make up for the losses. That is understandable because still the chances of it happening, right, is very slim. That sounds okay. I'm fine with that. But to say we're going to give you political risk insurance to insure you when, against revolutions, wars, political uprising, anything that's bad in a country that already is experiencing that shit. What? That's just, it sounds like a guarantee that you're going to get that payout. There's no risk for that country, that business to go over there and try and operate. So that is a problem. That's a big problem. And that's something that our political leaders know and that they can take advantage of.
A lot of them have taken advantage of that stuff, and we see it now. But the thing of it is, they do it under the guise of helping another country flourish or prosper.
Mm-hmm.
And
which is fine, but but
we're still treating China like a damn up and coming nation, even though they're ripping us off with junk products, which filters down.
But a lot of the
But
junk products are actually American businesses that are making these products. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
We're buying from American
I'm
businesses,
not
not
saying
Chinese
it's not.
businesses. Yeah.
I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying that they won't tool up to make things last because they only make money when they're cranking out junk products.
Yeah.
You know, and as long as we buy the junk products, then they're going to flourish until we get manufacturing back over here and somebody says, we should do this instead of this and make it last longer or perform better or taste better or whatever. But our government doesn't want that to happen. They stifle those people by telling them either you can or you can't have your business flourish. Because again, like George Carlin said, it's a big club and we ain't in it. And I was in the building trades and it's a cutthroat operation, but I still had to deal with the daggone prices of lumber coming out of Canada. And the nails coming from China. And all that stuff comes together. You sit there and go, well, I'll be back in a couple months and I'll have to redo it again because the damn products I put up there were unsatisfactory to my standard. And they say, well, your standards are too high. I said, well, maybe your standards are too low.
Yeah. And just to finish this last part of this deal, reading about what this is. So it says that, let me see where I want to pick up. All right, special considerations. As mentioned above, OPIC was consolidated with USAID's Development Credit Authority to form the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, which is the DFC. That's what it's done through now, by the way. The merger was realized after passing the Better Utilization of Investments Leading to Development Act on October 5th, 2018. The new entity allows the use of newer and more innovative financial products to help distribute private capital to developing economies. Just like its predecessor, the DFC aims to advance the interests of American foreign policy and national security as the private sector helps the development of emerging market economies. It accomplishes this through political risk insurance and debt financing, comprising of direct loans and guarantees of up to $1 billion for up to 25 years. It also provides support for equity investment and investment funds, feasibility studies, and technical assistance. The DFC allows private sector investment in several sectors, including energy, healthcare, critical infrastructure, technology. Businesses are required to meet specific standards and have an established history in their specific industries. The problem is that the people working for the businesses receiving the money don't have to have an established history in those industries. Therefore, you can get people, like political people, on the boards of these American companies that are getting these contracts to go overseas and do business. Yeah. The fact that we are giving money to equity investment and investment funds, which, guys, an investment fund, it could be anything from a hedge fund, something like maybe Rosemont Seneca, like Hunter Biden created, or it could be like Vanguard, a mutual fund company. It could be for a whole bunch of things. Why are we going to allow a Rosemont Seneca, who their business operation isn't, physically running an oil company, it's just financing one? How do you have any established history in a specific industry when your only role in those industries are financial roles and providing the funding to those industries? That's where I see a big problem with that. I don't know enough to sit down and tell you we shouldn't do that. I don't know enough to say if it's beneficial or efficient doing that, but I do see where that could go wrong. And I see where it has gone wrong. So, as I read more about it, this is a huge problem. And it's definitely something that our politicians, all the way up to former presidents of the United States, have 100% taken advantage of. The coincidences on what these programs cover are too much to ignore this. It really is. I mean, how can you look away from Hunter Biden being on the board of Burisma, an energy company, by the way, Rosemont, Seneca, providing financial assistance to these biological labs in Ukraine, which is proven, by the way, even admitted by Rosemont, Seneca on their own fucking website in 2016. Infrastructure, all the government contracts I see, building shit in Ukraine. And I'm only saying Ukraine because that's where the problems are going on right now. But there's so much of a paper trail here. And now we see where the money's coming from. We also see how the money can be laundered through insurance programs. And don't think for a second that a lot of these politicians that I'm not saying Biden still has any business going on over in Ukraine. He might, but I know, the Hunter Biden thing happened a few years ago. But people still do that are in our Congress. And don't think for a second that when they were negotiating diplomatic terms with Putin before this invasion, that, and I've said this already, that they didn't look at it as, well, we don't want to invade because there's going to be political fallout here in the United States, but there's also going to be a human death toll. And we also don't want to try and get involved in a world war. But if they do invade, we'll just kind of stay out of it. We'll start placing the blame on high gas prices and economical decline in the United States on Putin, which is what's going on. By the way, I said that before the White House press secretaries and stuff started talking about how it's Putin's gas prices. I said they were going to do that shit before they started doing it. But don't think that they also didn't think that, well, now we can, if there's political unrest and an actual war, we'll just sit back and collect our insurance money from these businesses. Just going right back to them.
Well, I'll say you're making a great point right there that like what you had predicted that they were going to start blaming it on Putin. I think the real answer is that technically they own this.
What do you mean?
Because they allowed it to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And Lou Rock says, why do we buy anything from a communist why are we buying stuff from a communist country? He specified China. Ukraine's not communist. Neither is Russia, by the way. None of them are that were in the former Soviet Union.
But if they're considered our enemy, we should never be buying things from them. And the Democrats always consider Russia the enemy. But yet they dump tons of money for oil and other things. Like they like.
You know why Russia's the enemy? You know why Russia's the fucking enemy now? Look, the Soviet Union's gone.
Because they said it was.
Well, but the Soviet Union's done. All right? The Soviet Union, Russia, along with all of those countries together, is what the threat was. Other than a nuclear threat right now, we see that Russia was nothing. They are nothing. Their economy is the size of, like, Italy. All right? They're the largest country in the world, have some of the most natural resources, but their economy is the size of Italy. Their military, they've lost 10,000 people, and that's not even, there's a lot of speculation on what that number was. That's actually the number that was posted by the pro-Kremlin media sites in Russia. So that's a low number. Over 10,000 people in less than a month. So you see, how efficient is their military? Not very efficient. Hell, after 4 days, they had to stop because they didn't have supplies. Russia's the threat now because it's a threat to American business in the region. And a lot of the American businesses are connected to a lot of the people that are telling us it's a fucking threat in our Congress. And this is Republicans and Democrats. Marco Rubio, who I liked, before all this, all of a sudden, before Russia was invading, was saying we need to go to war against them over this. and we needed to do more. And I'm thinking, why? What's it to you?
That's because they got their damn fingers in the military complex, stock market.
Well, just whatever.
When it kicks up, they'll make billions just for the simple fact that they allow them to start manufacturing the shit they've been wanting to manufacture for the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we don't even know what the technology level is of the military complex because they're not going to tell us, or we would be demanding it come out to the free market within the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Then they say, well, we send it over to China. Now China's got our technology. Well, yeah, I mean we've got any technology they ever had, and the same with Russia and any other country. Everybody shares the technologies because they all got their people by the hair, and this is nothing more than a slave planet to the common man.
Mm-hmm.
You get credit, you spend money, you have to go to work and make money to pay for that bill. And it's a constant fight until they deem you to be unuseful at a certain age and put you on something they've been robbing called Social Security, which is not governed by the goddamn Treasury system.
Social Security is the biggest fucking scam. I said this. Social Security is the
whole
thing that got me started on this whole podcast was the scam of Social Security. But
it is.
Putin is a threat to the U.S. because we're told he's a threat to the U.S. and because he's a threat to business interest in Ukraine and other Soviet countries.
And those business interests are tied to the American politicians.
Exactly. That's
wholeheartedly.
Yeah, a lot of them are. Exactly.
It's all about money laundering. Sum it up in one word: money laundering. If you run it together.
Mm-hmm. Ultimately, the money laundering so they don't pay taxes. Go ahead.
A reason I also add is that the Ukrainian government is no saint by any means because they're allowing this money laundering scandal to go on that Americans like us are being kept in the dark about.
That's because a certain element controls all of Europe.
Well, that's a tough one though, and I want you to think of it like this though. Ukraine was communist. Okay? In the 90s, Ukraine, Russia, all those countries were shit. Their economy, I mean, think about it. You had old people who couldn't work anymore that were, what we consider retired, lost all of their social welfare benefits that they had under a communist regime. Everything. Yeah. And they lost it all. People were looking, you see the soup lines, all that shit, right? They had nothing. People were starving to death. Can you blame the Ukrainians for allowing the United States to come in and set up all of these businesses? It's creating jobs, it's creating wealth, it's getting food on the tables, it's doing all this to get them out of a situation like that. I can't blame them for it. Yeah, was there corruption?
Yeah. They're getting paid. They're getting paid. The common person's getting paid like a third world country in poverty.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole gets of it. See, they don't want you to have a farm over in the Ukraine. You had to work for the corporate farms. Your ass sits in a high-rise hotel or motel or condo, whatever you want to call it. But they don't have the luxuries of other nations of their stature in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
They're a bastard country because they've been committing war crimes since their existence. When they came over there and said, we want you to make some labs up and we're going to give you money to do it, that is right there said our government is crooked as heck. And now they're allowing them to do it under the guise of, well, it's in another country, so it's not bothering us.
Mm-hmm.
But we're financing the crap. And these people are treated like crap. They're treated like crap.
You're breaking up, right, Karen?
Karen, you're in the Matrix.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. No, I agree. Oh, wow. Government's getting you. So, You're breaking up pretty bad. I want to say, I was about to say something. Now I forgot. I want to ask you guys something. Think about this. Do you think, or we see all the human right violations they keep accusing Putin of, and I'm not saying what he's doing is right at all. It's not. Okay, I think it's fucked up. He's killing civilians, all that stuff. So don't get me wrong here, but I just want to flip in and play the devil's advocate for a second. We see the Ukrainians taking the Russian prisoners, and they're allowing them to call their mom or their spouse and all that stuff, and they're treating them good. It seems like, right? But do you think that if Ukraine was taking the Russian prisoners and shooting them, putting a bullet in their head, or putting them in internment camps and starving them and making them build military infrastructure to protect them against the Russians, do you think the United States would say a fucking thing? Hell no. Think about it for a second. Now people are going to say, yeah, but Russia's the one invading them. They deserve it, blah, blah, blah. No, it doesn't work like that when it comes to these stupid rules of war, right? If you are the invading country, you're the defending country, you supposedly have to abide by certain laws, and the POW ones, for sure, are a big one. What is the difference between, even if a country's being invaded, you taking a prisoner and putting them in concentration camps and starving them out, just like the Germans did and the Japanese did, or shooting them? What's the difference? There's no difference. But we wouldn't say anything about it. In fact, people would be all on board about it, right? What's that, Raccoon? You're in and out. You got connection issues. We can't hear you. You're in you're really bad. But it's just a thought I had today. I don't think the United States would say a word about it. Not one word. There he is.
Well, and there's one thing you oftentimes say on the show about the military-industrial complex, like when y'all were talking just a minute ago, that they're literally just licking their chops.
Oh yeah, but that's a different, and that's all plays into this though. What's up, Raccoon?
Mm-hmm.
You there?
That was me. I was talking to my wife. She hollered at me right before I came out. Yep. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we hear you good now.
Okay. Yeah, Geneva Convention is what kicks all that in the butt, because Geneva Convention says what you can and can't do with civilians or with military. And since then, they haven't been able to put them in concentration camps.
Yep.
Some people say, but what about Vietnam? Vietnam never signed the Geneva Convention, so they basically ran rogue.
Well, obviously countries break it. But what I'm saying is what is the difference in whoever breaks it? Like if you're going to accuse Putin of war crimes because he's bombing civilians, right? Would you not also have to? And I'm not saying Ukraine's doing this. I'm just playing a devil's advocate, okay? Because I know that we wouldn't say a word about it. You would never even hear about it if they were taking the Russian prisoners of war and putting them in concentration camps and doing slave labor with them and starving them to death, or if they were just outright shooting them.
Yeah,
they wouldn't say a word.
Well, that's the thing. The government can say whatever they want to whoever they want and not feel any disregard about it, because they'll just claim it under the guise of national security. I mean, that's what they do with everything. They'll put it under the guise of national security and they'll squelch it right off the bat, and you never hear about it again.
And I want to say this, though, by the way. I want to say this, by the way, okay? I'm of the opinion that the Geneva Convention is, I see the reasoning behind it. Like, okay, you don't want people gassing people or whatever, right? But killing someone is killing someone. And honestly, if the United States went in there and started freaking firebombing, wiping people off the face of the fucking earth when we went to war, we'd probably have a lot less people messing with us because they wouldn't want to fall into the same consequences. Like,
yeah, exactly. But the
Japan
thing
never
of it
fucked with us
is, you
again.
see, it's not in the agenda. The agenda is to destroy the United States so they can make everything communist.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like I've said many times, the United States falls, so does the rest of the world, because there's nowhere else to run. The thing about communism, if you start communism, everybody turns on their neighbors to gain some foothold in their continuing life until they run out of things that they can do for the new founding communist regime. Even the politicians will fall to the gun, because once their use is used up, they no longer need them.
Which is a
People
good,
don't want to understand that.
which is an important thing to bring up, right? Do you know how communism ends up succeeding in countries like North Korea? First of all, they control the food. You control the food, you control the populace, because they're too hungry to think, right? You have to have food, so you control.
Too weak to fight and too hungry to think.
Exactly. That's the main thing. That's why you will never cure world hunger ever. I don't care how much fucking money you have. You will never cure world hunger, because people are going to seek power over money, because money comes with power. If you got power, you got money.
You got power and money, you got control.
Exactly. These countries in Africa, these war-torn countries in Africa that have been war-torn since the beginning of time, all right? They will continue to be war-torn. They will continue to be starving. They will continue to be corrupt. No matter how many billions of dollars Elon Musk writes a check for and sends to the non-profits that are getting tax exemptions to go and try and solve fucking world hunger. It's a myth. Because how are you going to get the food in there?
It is.
The only way to solve world hunger, all right, is to go in there, fucking kill Kim Jong-un, kill the oppressive leaders in these other countries that are starving people, all right, and completely take over, show them how to farm, show them how to use their resources, and make them into a society like the United States. It's the only way you're going to solve world hunger, and it's still not going to work, because eventually, if they aren't a part of the United States, they're going to fall, some of them are still going to fall victim of corruption.
Yeah.
So
until you get all the rats that are on the ship that go down with the ship, you always have a population of rats that are going to come back in numbers later on.
Mm-hmm.
Most people say, well, I'm not worried about 100 years from now. People need to think about their grandchildren and great-grandchildren. They'll still be here. You want them to fall?
Yeah.
You want them to be the ones that suffer and be tortured slaves, because that's what it'll be. You'll work until they decide you've had enough work for the day before they let you go home, and maybe you'll be able to relax and you'll have something to eat. Maybe you'll be going hungry 3 days a week, depending on your output, whether or not the government cuts off your Bitcoin. Maybe you'll just expire because you're just tired of it. I mean, people don't think about that shit because it upsets them. We need, as Americans, we need to start thinking about that again, because that's what brought us around to winning the revolution, was everybody had a reason to get rid of the tyranny that was being imposed on them.
Mm-hmm.
And we have that right to oppose tyranny in this country.
Yeah, and they had the means to do it. That's the important part, because everyone.
Well, we have the means.
That's
too.
What I'm saying. That's
we
what I'm saying.
The means too.
I'm talking about us. I'm saying when you can get rid of tyranny all you want, but if you're disarmed and you don't have the means to get rid of it, then good luck.
But
that's the problem.
You're just like Australia. You're just like Australia.
Just like a lot of countries. By the way,
I mean,
they're
turning Australia back into a slave island.
Yeah. Other than Australia and now New Zealand, I think. Go find me a country. Yeah, go find me a country that eliminated gun rights for the purpose of eliminating murders and mass shootings inside of that country. No, it was usually done to disarm the population to prevent any revolutions.
Exactly. And that's what they've been trying to do here for the last 171 years.
Mm-hmm. That is
we
a real
started
thing.
The local gun laws and stuff like that go against the Constitution, and nobody stood up and said, hey, you can't do that.
Mm-hmm. I want you to think about this too. Now, I don't know nothing about, maybe Woody Bush can chime in on this. I don't know what their money system's like up there, but recently Biden signed an executive order wanting to experiment or look into an official U.S. digital currency. To me, that sounds like, okay, we want to move out of a cashless society, which is extremely bad. One, it's bad because, fuck, if I go paint someone's house one weekend or mow their yard and they pay me in cash, I don't want to pay taxes on that. Call me greedy, but everyone's greedy. Even the business owners that talk about you wanting to raise taxes. I love when I see business owners, yeah, we need to raise taxes on the rich, and they are the rich, right? They're the 1%. Well, why don't you just stop itemizing your tax deductions and paying paying taxes on the full amount of your income, and then voluntarily write more money to the IRS and say, no, don't give it back, just keep it. If you truly believe, if they truly believe that the rich should be taxed more, if a rich person gets up there and says, yeah, we need to raise taxes on the rich, so you're saying you need to raise taxes on yourself, how much did you itemize last year on your federal income taxes? How much, money did you give? I guarantee you they all paid the fucking bare minimum that they had to pay.
Mike, it's not only that, but you also take in consideration that when you raise tax on the wealthy, they raise the prices of their goods and services.
They do. Here's the other thing.
Look at the goddamn bill we just had thrown up in Congress and the Senate.
Yeah.
To COVID relief and all this other crap on there, plus a 21% pay increase for them assholes.
Yeah. And look, I'm not a raise taxes on the rich person. I don't think we should raise taxes on anybody. I just love when it's amusing me when I hear someone who is in the 1% get up there and say, oh, you need to tax me more. Well, then why wouldn't you just voluntarily pay more in fucking taxes? Why is it taking... Why? That's like saying, oh, you have to force me to do this because no one wants to pay taxes. They don't want to pay taxes. If you truly believe that you needed to be taxed more, you would not itemize or take any deductions for anything, and you would pay the full amount of taxes that the government wants to impose on you currently, let alone a higher rate. Think about how hypocritical that is. The other thing is they are okay with saying that because it sounds good in the media and it sounds good for their business, but all they're going to do is turn around and they're going to funnel a bunch of money into life insurance. They're going to funnel a bunch of money into the nonprofits. And I'm not talking about their corporations. I'm talking about the businesses, that they're individuals themselves. Or they're going to have the business pay them less in a salary, and they're going to get around it. All right? They're going to get around it. I know because I work in the industry, and props to them. I'm all for someone who is in the 1% trying to find out how they don't have to pay taxes. I'm all about it. But don't get up there and say that you need to be taxed more when you're doing that. Don't be that asshole. Because then I just tell you, well, then if you're wanting to be taxed more, then why don't you just pay more in taxes instead of deducting your income? It's a simple fix. You don't have to raise taxes.
They would rather the middle class foot the bill.
Well, yeah, okay, that's a good point. And they just all they're doing is talking and saying things that people want to hear, so they're going to be on their side. That's it. They want people to like them because if people like them, then they go to them, they give them their business, and it creates more revenue. Whatever. But practice what you preach. Okay, if you're communism, or if you're a communist, then fucking practice it. Don't just sit there and be 100% capitalist saying we need to go to socialism, all right, when you're the one taking advantage and your whole life is, built on capitalism. Don't do that. So there is a lot of hypocrisy in there. Like, honestly, you don't have to raise taxes on the rich by raising the federal income tax brackets or the corporate tax rates. If you want to raise taxes on the rich, leave the tax rates where they're at. Hell, you could actually lower them, okay, and get rid of all itemized deduction opportunities for them in the top 1%. Say, whatever you bring in as a salary, you can't deduct shit from your income. You got to pay the full amount of that tax bracket. We have a progressive tax rate, and that you pay in different brackets, so your effective rate is usually lower than what your marginal rate is. But they have to pay taxes on the full amount of income, no deductions. Do you know how much more tax revenue the U.S. would bring in? They'd probably double it. I'm not saying to do that. I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm just telling you that you don't have to. It's not the tax rates that's keeping the government from getting tax revenue. It's all the deductions and stuff that they allow these people to take advantage of, myself included. We all do. We all take our standard deduction, that $12,500 per person, or $25,000 if you're married. We all do it. Why? Because none of us want to pay taxes. None of us. I don't care who you are. I gave an example yesterday. Henry Ford literally, during World War II, built the largest factory in the country to build B-24 bombers. And because that factory was going to go into a Democratic county, just the very tip end of it, at the end of the assembly line, was going to go into a Democratic county that was going to force that little bit to pay higher property or higher local taxes. He said, fuck that, and built that shit at a right angle to stay inside of the Republican county, and just put a turntable in the factory to turn the airplanes and keep it inside of that county. Now think about how much money that cost, as opposed to how much he was actually going to pay in taxes. I guarantee you it didn't save him in taxes. He just didn't want to pay the fucking government. People go and buy new equipment for their business all the time. Farmers will go buy tractors, a $100,000 tractor that they can depreciate and deduct over the years and write off in that year, just so they don't have to give that money to the government. It's not that people don't want to spend money. It's that they don't want to give the government their money. And that holds true in any situation. It doesn't matter who you are. I have not met a person that is okay with voluntarily paying more in taxes. Because if you were, you'd do it. You would do it. No one does it. Who in this room has ever voluntarily paid more in taxes? Not me. I try to pay zero.
Definitely not me either. But like where you were talking about Henry Ford just a while ago, not wanting to pay more in taxes by building like a certain like factory or assembly line in a certain way to where a Democrat safe county would not collect any tax revenue, and it stayed in a Republican safe county. He was basically working and gaming the system to work in his favor. Mm-hmm. And it's like he mastered that art.
By the way, you want to know something about Henry Ford? Now, Henry Ford is probably...
And that's the same Henry Ford, famous for the Model T.
Yeah. Henry Ford.
We know that one, but what else?
Henry Ford, by the way, all you people that have work benefits, people are going to say, oh, well, the unions did that. No. You need to learn. Henry Ford is responsible for a lot of the institutions in our 8-hour workday, paying higher wages, treating workers good. Henry Ford's idea was, if I pay my workers more, I work them less, all right, and I give them benefits, they're going to go and they're going to buy cars from me. He looked at his laborers like a customer, because they are. When you had other companies, like let's say GM or someone, was paying nothing for low-cost labor, those same people weren't able to afford a car. So you're losing, how many people did Ford employ? A lot of people. That's that many more sales if you're paying him enough to go and purchase a vehicle from you. And he's getting the money right back in return. And you get loyalty. Here's the other thing Henry Ford was famous for. Henry Ford or Adolf Hitler loved Henry Ford. Loved him. Had a life-size picture of him in his office. They got along very well. And not just Henry Ford. There's a lot of other businessmen in the United States that got along with Adolf Hitler. Henry Ford was a anti-Semite. Extreme anti-Semite. He wrote papers and stuff about how much he hated Jews. He also, I just found this out, when we entered World War II and we started production for World War II, he was already ahead of everyone as far as having to change his facilities around to, build airplanes, build tanks, all that stuff. Why? He was building that shit for the Germans already.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I watched a PBS special about Henry Ford, but I think there was no mention of his. I don't think there was any mention of his relationship with Adolf Hitler. But I remember the special talking about him having a right hand man, trying to fight off like the unions for as long as they possibly could, and then with his vast fortune, he was buying up land in Brazil and in other countries that Henry Ford's grandson later sold back to the Brazilian government for practically like a fraction of the price.
He wanted to make his own country. Here's the thing. Mm-hmm. What I'm getting at, all right, is Henry Ford was a capitalist in every definition of the word, okay? Henry Ford did do a lot of good. Because as racist as he was, he actually hired a lot of minorities and paid them extremely well, gave them all the same benefits because, again, he said their customers are going to buy cars.
Yeah, he wanted his employees to be loyal to him.
Exactly.
Who were also his customers.
Yeah, but
and they were not only loyal to him, but he wanted to also be loyal to them.
Yeah, and here's the other thing, though. Damn it, now I forgot where the hell I was going with this. He's a capitalist. What you see is a lot of these high-end people, these big business owners, are capitalists, but they get up there and they preach socialism or communism. They don't want to be capitalists. They want to implement communist and socialist tendencies inside of their business as far as their employees are concerned. Because if you look back on communism and the Communist Manifesto, a lot of hourly workers today are paid, they are in a communist structure at their jobs. So the business in our economy is capitalist, yes. But a lot of these businesses, with all the stuff that and how they operate and pay employees, especially at these car manufacturers and stuff, they want to push the socialism and the communism because then they can implement that kind of structure in their businesses. And that's what it's allowing them to create profits at the upper levels. Just a thought, right? So he said companies run legalized pyramid schemes, communism. Yeah. That's just a thought. And that's why, these guys that get up there that are wealthy saying, tax me, raise taxes on me, because it sounds good to the lower people and the workers. Or they say, oh, we're all about socialism. We need government spending. We need government intervention. Do you really fucking think that Amazon, or not Amazon, but let's see, Coca-Cola or someone like that wants government intervention? No. The only intervention they want is controlled intervention when they know the people in the government that they're going to be dealing with, and they can lobby to them and have them implement legislation that's beneficial to their business interests. That's it. If they had no control over the government, they wouldn't fucking want any government intervention, would you?
And then that you're marking a pork barrel spending, too.
Yeah. There needs to be some government regulation, but as far as lobbying and government intervention and any kind of government control in businesses, that's going to breed corruption. All right? And when you have interest groups that are going to go and be in contact with the government, you're going to breed corruption. And that's where these problems start. If you let the private sector do what the private sector is going to do, you will have corruption, but it's not going to be nearly as bad, and it can be more isolated than if the government has corruption. Because the government is over everything, and now our government's over the entire world. Corruption there is corruption everywhere. I can choose not to...
Hey, Mike.
Hold on, let me finish this. I can choose who not to do business with. If I think, someone, I don't like a business because they said something about me or whatever, I can choose not to do business with them. But I can't choose not to do business with the government. I can't choose not to pay taxes to the government. That's the difference. I have a lot of options in the private sector on who I want to give my money to, but I don't have any options as far as the government's concerned. That's why you need to figure out, and that's why the corruption in the government is the worst thing. Go ahead, Raccoon.
what I was going to say was businesses, especially big businesses, tend to have power in the government to squash a lot of the patents that might be infringing against their products, like different kinds of automobiles, different kinds of products sold everywhere, different cures. You know, there's so many things that are getting squashed by the big business entities that hurts America because you may have a guy sitting next to you on a day going bus that can't afford a car, and he's got the cure of cancer in his hand, but they won't let him produce it because they can't make a profit off of curing shit when they can charge you for the rest of your life. That's how our government works. They won't let you put patents out if they deem it to be too detrimental to their output. They'll deem it a national security problem, and then they'll bury it, or they'll take it and steal it away to some other company that's going to work with them to put it in a different branch of technology.
Yeah. It's a lot to think about. Go ahead.
The whole system is crooked. The whole system is crooked.
But it could easily be fixed. It could easily be fixed as long as you had the will to fix it within that system. Right? Like there's certain little things, just little things, term limits for one. Little things that you could do that could not eliminate corruption. You're not going to eliminate it, but it could definitely reduce it. Yes.
You could do a lot of damage if you just said, okay, from now on, all laws have to be turned around for that they express the that they're expressed to everybody and not just chosen people. Like if I can't insider trade, the government can't insider trade.
Oh well, yeah. Well, see,
if I can't get pulled over for if I have to get pulled over for drunk driving or speeding, a congressman or a senator or anybody else in the government can be pulled over the same way.
Well, the difference is, so it's
even
not
police forces do
it's,
that.
What it is you need to hold the public sector to a much higher standard than the private. Okay, you need to
exactly
because
right now it's laws for thee but not for me.
Yes, because I don't
That's
have
what
to.
it comes down to.
I don't have to, and I'm not talking about. When I say public sector, I'm not necessarily talking about public employees like a cop or something like that. And hear me out when I say this. And we're not talking about, as far as rules. Obviously, they all have to follow the rules just like we do. I'm talking about elected leaders and the people that are put into place, by elected leaders that are, like are the people that they, that they give their jobs to, like the cabinet and all that stuff. Those are the people that need to be held to higher standards. Our Congress or House, Senate, President, all that stuff, they should not be trading individual stocks on individual companies. They should be held to only trading ETFs and broad market securities that track the entire American market, and they are not allowed to have any foreign investment at all. That's an easy fix. Easy fix. Put a term limit on all of them. Easy fix. The problem is, the reason it's not easy is because you have to have the people voting on it are the ones that are affected by it, right? That's why it's not easy. But
it's telling the kid to go out and pick a big switch to whip his butt with, and he comes back in with a little piece of grass.
I've done that before, by the way.
It's time. It's time that we go out and pick the switch.
Yeah. Just like I think that if you are an elected official, okay, or you serve in a job that was you were put in place by an elected official, there should be harsher sentences on you and harsher punishment when you do break some of these laws. Much harsher punishment. You should be held to a higher standard because of the power that you're given. With power comes responsibility, and we're not holding any of them fucking responsible because we don't have any fucking consequences for them.
Well, something else too, Mike, is you have to be able to have a government that's not out to make quick money in government. You're fixed to a certain wage is set by another entity of the government, and they make their own different ones, but it has to be voted on by the people on how much money they're going to get.
Well, you see, I'm fine with saying, okay, if you're elected and you're serving in that role, you don't pay income taxes. I'm 100% okay with that. First of all, it's a very minority group of people anyway.
Don't anyway.
Yeah, right. But then you say that, and you say, okay, you don't need to pay. So in Washington D.C., these people don't pay any state and local taxes, right? And anything that needs to be done in Washington D.C. can be still funded by U.S. taxpayer money. But the elected people, we elected you. Your benefit is no income taxes while you serve. All right. They should not have a fucking pension after serving only one term or 2 terms. Okay. They should not have free health care for the rest of their life once they get out of there. Think about it. People work 40 years before being able to take advantage of a pension or a 401k. If you have a 401k, you have to wait till you're 59 and a half before you don't get fucking penalized for taking that money out. Or you go on the Medicare when you get older and all that stuff. But we don't hold, we'll let a politician and give them entitlement to a pension when they reach a certain age after only working for 8 years. That's right.
Something that really bites about that is a lot of times you hear Congress or the Senate saying, we don't know we're going to be able to take use Medicare next year for the seniors, but we did find some money from Medicaid, so those people are okay.
Mm-hmm.
When you're retiring and you're paying a pension, you pay into that Medicare, and it's supposed to be there.
Yep.
It's supposed to be a guarantee. The only thing that's guaranteed is Medicaid.
And Medicaid, for those of you that don't know, Medicaid is for broke people. It's for the poor people, or for like a disabled person that's getting Social Security early, right? You may go Medicaid.
No. It's for people on section housing or people who are not into a disabled area.
Mm-hmm. SSI.
But
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Medicare.
Yeah.
If you get on SSDI, you could be eligible for Medicare, I think, within 2 years, give or take.
Yeah, but
because the thing about how SSDI works, if you have 20 work credits, you
have to work and pay in.
You're able to qualify for that.
You had to work and pay in for it.
There's a lot of people, though, on Social Security disability since they were born because they had a birth defect or something.
And they're on Medicaid, not
been
Medicare.
Exonerated.
Yes, and they're on Medicaid, not Medicare. Here's the thing, too.
Yeah, but once they reach a certain age, they go over to the Medicare area and get off the Medicaid.
I think the age is 65.
It is. But I want to... here's the biggest thing. You want to know the difference between Medicaid and Medicare real quick? Go to a nursing home that has the people that live there primarily on Medicaid, and then go to one where it's funded by the people that are paying for long-term care insurance or are on Medicare. A massive difference. Massive difference. Okay? So... those are just things.
Actually, that depends on where you're at, because some of those care facilities are in like damn warehouses. I know people who have been in some of those that were just massively understaffed.
Yeah,
and
those are the Medicaid ones. Because
they weren't Medicaid. They were Medicaid. It was Medicare.
Well, yeah, some of them are for the Medicare. What I'm getting at is, so you have what's called long-term care insurance as well. Right, and so the people that pay for that, they get other benefits on top of the Medicare stuff.
Some people never got long-term care when they were working, and it came on them after they retired and stuff.
Yeah, well, you're supposed to get it before you retire. That's something you get long before.
There's a lot of care facilities that actually are flagrantly abusing the patients just because they don't take care of them. They don't have the food for them. There's not enough staff for them.
And you know why, right?
Sometimes
because those benefits are being paid by the government. And a lot of those facilities don't know when the government's going to pay them their money. here's the thing. Everyone thinks, like, I fucking love this when I hear them talking about the long-term care shit, and they talk about the retirement homes and stuff. The retirement homes that you see that are shitty are usually getting the funding from the government, be it the person that's living there is getting government benefits paying for it, or they're getting direct funding from the government. The reason why they're so shitty is because the government is terrible about paying, and if they do pay, it's very little. Look, and,
the government's only good at the government's only good with money when they're handing it out to foreign countries, but when it comes back to the American citizen, they could care less about anything.
And
unless it's voting season.
Yeah. And here's the thing. If the government has control over how much they're giving these people, right, in these facilities, if they really fucking cared and the government was so great, you would see the nicest assisted living facilities ever, right? It would all be nice. No, it's not like that. Here's the thing. I'm sorry to tell people, but capitalism works. It works very good because the nicest places are the ones that are done privately. Yeah, maybe they're more expensive and stuff like that, but tell me what the government's giving you. They ain't giving you nothing.
Something you didn't say is, if you're in a long-term care facility as a retired person, the government still has to pay money to those hospitals, so they get extra money besides donations and a cut of your bank account if you're a patient there.
Mm-hmm.
That money never stops. It's just the fact that they never know when the hell it's going to come in the mail.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you have a government shutdown, then the care facility may be in a little bit of a hurt, but they're all getting Medicare or Medicaid insurance money from the government, regardless of what the damn living standards are in them. They all get a certain percentage. But it's also up to the care facilities and their reputations on how they take care of their people. Some of them are advertised as the best thing since white sliced bread this side of heaven. You go there to look at the place, it looks like a rundown damn gymnasium.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm about to cut this off, so I appreciate, or on Facebook, that is. So I appreciate everyone for listening, especially on Facebook. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel. Again, Real Conservative Talk on YouTube, just in case we get shut down on Facebook or on Podbean or wherever. That way we have multiple locations. Also, I have the Federal Report. Federal Report is where I go and I submit articles that I write. You know, maybe you find them interesting, maybe you don't, but I think I have a lot of good information there as well. But I do appreciate you guys on Facebook for listening, and I will not be on tomorrow, but I will be back on Thursday. Thank you.